Hey, what's up guys? Dan Trevidi here. I hope you're all well. So we've just gone through a really tough period of 10, 11 weeks of lockdown. We've seen some of the most difficult climates come upon the market, and we've seen things go up and down really quickly. And this just goes to show that if you're able to flex and move with the market quickly, then you can pick up some great deals. But we have obviously seen some prices drop, some lenders pull from the market, and overall the property industry has suffered because of the coronavirus. And it got me thinking, what if you were an investor who has just invested some money and in the period of lockdown, so March, April, May, bit of June, were due to be paid back? And that might have been something like a joint venture or might have been a fixed rate of return. And for whatever reason, because of the issues of the coronavirus, the person that you invested with wasn't able to pay you back. And then on the flip side, if you're a developer or a property investor and you've borrowed money or you've done a joint venture with an investor and you've not been able to pay people back in the current climate over the last few months. And it got me thinking, because I've actually not got a huge amount of projects on the go with investors. The majority of them are now just my own cash and me. And the ones that I have got are longer term projects with people that I know really well, live local, and they're kind of ticking along nicely. There is a deal that's been going on for just under a year, and I've just paid that investor back, plus all of the interest that we agreed at the outset. So in this video, we're going to talk about the different ways you should have been paid back, and if you haven't been paid back, some of the things you could do to try and resolve the issue from something going wrong to something going bad. I'm also going to touch up on points about investors and what they should really consider before investing with anyone. And I'm also going to talk about developers, the other end, what they should consider before they do a deal with an investor. Now, I've done my fair share of these sorts of deals, everything from joint ventures to fixed rate of returns. Definitely in the early days, I did a lot more JVs. And they worked really well. We made a lot of money through rental income, and we made a lot of money when those properties were sold. But not every deal has gone smoothly. And later on, I've stepped away from joint ventures and done more of the fixed rate of return. Not as good a return for the investor, but it's fixed. It does exactly what it says on the tin. The risk is a lot lower, as long as it's structured in the right way. But before we get into that, let's just touch up on the points of what if you're an investor and you were due to be paid back in this moment of time, or you were someone who borrowed or did a joint venture with someone and those funds were due to be paid out, or the deal was supposed to be generating income just about now and it hasn't been due to this crisis. The first thing you should not do is put your head in the sand. That doesn't get anyone anywhere. And a lot of the people that I deal with, it tends to be suppliers or tradespeople, rogue, cowboy type individuals who will just turn their phone off, stop answering calls, put their head in the sand. That doesn't get anyone anywhere. You're best to face up to the situation, deal with the problems head on, and it tends to stop things escalating, because it tends to not be the problem which causes the issues, it's the ramifications of how it's dealt with cause things to lead on to the big lawsuits and big disruptive fallouts and all of those things which all cost money and means that you're not earning any profit. My advice is to go back to the start of the joint venture or go back to the start of the fixed rate of return and think about how the conversation went. What did you discuss if things went wrong? What is in the agreement? How was it put across? Were you as the investor told about all the pitfalls and the things that could go wrong, and did you sign up anyway? Equally, the person borrowing the funds, did you have those questions? Have you got everything laid out, or did you just promise the earth? And even if you didn't do it right at the start, that's still no reason to turn your back on the situation. Like I said at the start, hit it head on, have a conversation, get the dialogue going, and that way you can work to an amicable solution. This impact on the market isn't driven by an individual. Yes, individual choices and individual decisions can make things better or worse, but overall, if the underlying factor is that this situation is causing things to be delayed, causing things to reduce in value, causing things not to sell, causing things not to rent, it just needs to be put in place so the end goal is still achieved in a reasonable time frame, and the way to get there is agreed between both parties, and you should find yourself in a pretty good position so things don't escalate. What if you're picking up some great deals? What if you've been able to sell some deals or rent them or refinance them for exactly what you were expecting or even more? and you're able to speed up the payment. Now, I've been really fortunate because we're a third of the way through a project which I was able to get done through a great team, and we were able to use supplies left over from other projects, and then we were able to get it rented and refinance it, and then I was able to pay back an investor that I did a deal with just under a year ago, and she was absolutely over the moon because a lot of people in this current climate aren't able to do that. But if you're able to demonstrate, even in these tough times, your experience, the way you do business, you can still honor your agreements and you can still over deliver for those investors. It will go a really long way. Even if things are a little bit against you, you could still rise above it and show how you do things when things are a little bit stacked against you. But on to investors. So out of all of the deals that I've done with as many investors over the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of different investors. We didn't always do a deal. Sometimes the deal didn't stack up. Sometimes the investor didn't want to invest. Sometimes the deal wasn't right for the investor, but they invested later on. And sometimes I didn't want to work with the investor. One of the things I started to do really early on was ask everyone to sign an NDA. And what I realized that even though it was a bit of a stumbling block for when people wanted to talk to me, it actually filtered out the type of people that I wanted to work with. And it was the type of people that were happy to take the time to sign a document, to have an open conversation with me, that were confident that they weren't going to take what I told them and go behind my back. So that was one of my first filters. And as the years went by, I introduced more filters to try and filter out the people that I wanted to work with and the people that I didn't want to work with. It didn't always go right for me. I definitely had some gut feelings about some individuals that I didn't want to work with. And as we grew and I had staff and they dealt with the individuals, it definitely did get into the point where we were working with people that it just wasn't right for them and it wasn't right for us. But before we get into that, I just want to talk about some investors, especially some new guys who are maybe got some cash, starting to join the Facebook groups, starting to look for deals, starting to look for individuals to work with. I get quite a few messages from people I've never even had a conversation with. I barely have even just checked out their Facebook profile, and they're sending me messages about, can I mentor them? Do I do training? Can they invest with me? Can they do a joint venture with me? It's as if they want to just chuck their money at something and hope for the best and put the ownership on someone else. The money is no longer with them. And if it doesn't deliver, it's kind of the other person's fault. This is my message to investors. Your money is so precious and you must hang on to it and don't just do a deal willy-nilly. Equally, on the flip side, don't just think because you're doing a deal with someone whose public profile is quite well known or their headline figures seem to be being banded around as being great success. I've seen a number of investors who I talked to 4 or 5 years ago who didn't want to work with me because I didn't work in the right locations or I didn't work in the right sector and I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. But they went on to invest with more high profile property trainers, or they went on to invest in more high profile property sectors or locations which on paper looked like they were going to give a better return. They didn't want to listen to what I had to say, which was quite boring, quite mundane. My little student market in Norwich wasn't setting the world on fire, and it definitely wasn't the sexiest thing that people were talking about. And I would tell people, honestly, look, you're going to get caught out if you just look for the glitz and the glamour and the shiny lights of investments. People thought that they were special because they were paying to be mentored by people and they were in these circles. And they thought that in those circles, they were untouchable and they could rise above the rest. A few years down the line, those same individuals have gone on to lose tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds in some deals that never stacked up. So my advice is to all investors is never rush into any deal and do not follow the crowd and do not follow the shiny lights. It's like when you walk into a pub and you see these guys on these fruit machines that then they're addicted to these flashing lights. It's as if you can see the same thing happening over social media through these investors who want to follow the high profile names and they're not that interested in the deal. Don't do it. Always try and get into the detail of the deal. And I always say to every investor who is looking for a deal, think poker. In poker, you always find a reason to fold your hand, to not play your hand. And you should take the same analogy to any deal that is presented to you. Always find a reason not to do the deal. And you may turn 10, 15, 20, 100 deals away, but eventually the right deal will find you and it will be the right one for you in the right set of circumstances and the right one to invest your funds in. And there isn't many guarantees in property, but one of the things I can always guarantee to anyone is there will always be another deal. Moving on to the individual who is working with the JV partner, who maybe is the developer or is the deal sourcer but wants to be included in the deal. They may be looking to do a joint venture with someone who's going to inject the cash in, or maybe they're looking to borrow funds on a fixed rate of return and pay those funds over a set period of time for a fixed rate return back. My biggest advice to anyone is, just because someone wants to do a deal with you doesn't mean that you should just automatically do a deal with them. Always remember what your goal is, how you do business, how you work, and if that fits with how you want to work with other individuals. So the investor that I've just paid back, she was my friend first. We got on like house on fire, but there's no reason for me to get into doing a deal with her. It was actually the commercial relationship that's very, very solid and very, very clinical in terms of we knew exactly what was being paid, when it was being paid back, and how much for. And there was no grey area. There was no friendship grey area that overcasted or overshadowed the deal in question. And because we kept the two separate and both parties were able to completely fulfill what was obligated of them, set out an agreement that we have, it's worked really well. And we've done 3 deals together now. But it doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes when you jump into an investment with a person that you potentially don't know, you've maybe only talked to on the phone or you've met them for a coffee, you can sometimes fall victim for these investments or these partnerships where the expectation on you isn't in line with what is set out in the agreement. Or sometimes the investor wants to invest with you, but they want to become your best friend and they don't know how to distinguish between the two. I've also seen investors who invest with people who also want to then build businesses with these people and want them to jump on their bandwagon of different businesses that are fast paced, lots of different things happening, and they don't always want to do it, and a conflict starts or a disagreement happens because the agreement wasn't set out in stone in the beginning. I've also seen agreements set out in stone right at the beginning, but they just get completely ignored. I've done investment deals where the funds are completely laid out. We've purchased the property and then the investor doesn't send the funds, and then they find a way to blame you for them not sending the funds. I've also done deals with people where we've got to get finance for properties and they've put false information on the application form, which means that lender will not lend on that property with that investor in because they've point blank put the wrong information on, which they can't substantiate. So then you have to find ways to exit the investor so you can just crack on with the property. Property is full of hurdles and full of curveballs, and the last thing you want is to be distracted on the project because the investor is kicking and screaming, or the person you invested with isn't doing exactly what you thought that they were going to do. So both parties have a part to play in getting things set up, and both parties can be guilty of rushing into doing a deal just for the sake of doing a deal. And that's where things do go wrong. For me, I've gone full circle. I want an easy life. I really like doing my own deals with my own cash, but I am more than happy to work with the small pool of investors that I've got great relationships with. We've done multiple deals together. We both know how each other work, and we both have respect and trust in each other's ability to deliver exactly what we say we're going to do it, when we're going to do it. A quick video on the subject, really just highlighting that yes, now is a tough time, but that shouldn't be any reason that you shouldn't be focusing on delivering the results that you've promised in your investment from both sides. And hopefully, if you have successfully repaid investors back, or you have successfully had your investment back, you're happy. If you're not, if you're in a situation where that isn't going to happen, then just go back to the initial conversations when everything was nice and hunky-dory and it looked like you were going to sail off into the sunset when the deal was done and be very, very happy. Think about the conversations, how they went and what was said on both sides. And yes, if things are difficult right now, and I've got friends who are developers who are very high profile, really great people, I've got huge amounts of respect for, but having really tough times because the market they're in, or the situation that they're in, or even some of the investors' decisions have put them in situations where it's now becoming difficult to be able to exit out of those projects. Remember, you got into these deals together, especially if it was a joint venture, and you should work on an exit together. But if for whatever reason you can't fulfill the timeline, there needs to be stepped staged, amicable process to exit the investor from the deal that they can agree to, that the developer can stick to and can work with in these current times. Because some markets haven't really been affected, some markets have definitely flourished, but some are really struggling. And when the market is up against you, it's not the individual's fault for that impact on their ability to deliver the result. If the investor is seeding funds into a project and their funds have been massively impacted by this pandemic and by this lockdown situation, and they can no longer fulfill their obligation, which will have a ripple effect, a domino effect for the development to progress. Again, I've got friends in those situations, but they're working together to work with a lender, putting up security to see the project through so all parties can deliver and walk away with what they expected. But that's it from me, guys. Hope you found the content rich. I'll catch you soon.